Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jesse Kowalski, curator of exhibitions at the Norman Rockwell Museum and curator of Hanna-Barbera, the Architects of Saturday Morning. Has everybody had a chance to go up and view the exhibition? Yeah? Okay. If you notice the toys in the cases, they all belong to one person, Mr. David Nimitz. I believe he's the world's largest, or one of the world's largest collectors of Hanna-Barbera toys and memorabilia. He has approximately 4,000 toys in his collection that he's had throughout his entire life. So what you see upstairs is just a minor fraction of everything. It's really the best of the best, though. Some unique pieces, very rare pieces, some early pieces, some things that Dave, may have the only copy of. So we're really lucky to have Dave help us with the exhibit. And I've been working with Dave for the last year and a half on this show. He's got tons of great stories about his career in animation and his lifelong passion for collecting toys, and also his mother's influence, which played a big role in his life. So with that, I would like to introduce my good friend, David Nimitz.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon. I started in animation right out of high school, the reason I went into animation is because of the Flintstones. And at an early age, just hearing the first three notes of the song, I ran to the television. And if it was on TV, I wanted it, toy-wise. Like, those were my rock stars. Those were so Mom started buying all the toys that were there. In the early 70s, Flintstone stuff was very available. So just kind of grew up with having it in the house all the time. And, I wasn't into getting sets. I didn't know about any of that stuff at that point. I just liked to have the toys. And it wasn't until later on then when I really got serious about it. But, I thank my mother for what I have today, because she was really good about preserving the toy as I got into my teen years, and she took a lot of it away and hid it. And I have a lot of friends that their mothers threw away all their stuff. So they, and I have friends that collect Star Wars and all that stuff, and it just got tossed. But also I had the fortunate of living in LA and growing up 10 minutes away from Hanna-Barbera. And so as a kid, I used to ride my bike up there and jump in the trash and take out giant amounts of cells and drawings from the studio. And it was about 79, 1980 when a 10-year-old could do that. And they were just like, oh, it's just kids, leave them alone. But also I would stare in the windows because everybody had toys on their desks of all the Hanna-Barbera stuff. And, as the employees, as I've learned later on, were like, oh, they just gave it to us. We never kept it, and I'm, later on, I'm thinking, God, whatever happened to all that, But anyways, I just kind of as my teen years went on, I was more interested in going to animation, and I started on a pup named Scooby Doo as an intern while I was in high school. And so it was less than a year's work, but I was just being at the studio. I never got to meet Joe and Bill at that point. I did meet Joe when I was 8 years old, and then that was, I hadn't seen him again until later on. So I just continued. After that, I went on to the bigger studios and went to Don Bluth and worked on stuff there as an 18, 19-year-old guy. After that ended, I went on to Beavis and Butthead. So I was like, what is this? But the drawings were hideous, but it was a funny show. And then we all heard about this film called The Lion King, and we all started putting our resumes in, and that was my first big picture. So needless to say, in my 20s, I was just working constantly from studio to studio. Meantime, my mom was buying stuff and telling me, oh, I got this and that. And I was in my 20s. I'm like, yeah, whatever, Mom, whatever. Because I didn't think about it. So she would be buying all this stuff, and finding it at garage sales and swap meets. And I remember being 11, 12, and she'd be dragging me to swap meets, and she'd buy a Fred Flintstone push puppet without a head. And I'd be like, what are you buying that for? And she'd like, shut up, we could salvage it for parts. I was like, you know, I'm like 11, and who knew, like 37 plus years later, that she was so right, because they're selling body parts of these toys on eBay. And, you know, they're no longer toys. They are actually museum pieces because it's a dead company. And there's something about the Flintstones and every other Hanna-Barbera character that really moves people more than Disney would. You know, I'm a fan of Disney as well, but not the newer stuff, of course. I love the old stuff. But there's just something different with finding a Fred Flintstone in a sea of, you know, Happy Meal toys from Disney or anything like that. But anyway, so as a young kid, I would ride my bike up, and I was always very geared towards the Flintstones as well. And we just happened to meet, me and my mother met Dick Bickenbach. And at the time, I was 10 years old. I just knew he was a guy that worked at Hanna-Barbera. I didn't know who he was. And he drew a Fred Flintstone for me. And I'll show you the picture. It's in the lobby. But he drew it for me at that time at 10 years old, and my mother took it away immediately. And thank God she did, because I have it today. And now, as a collector, people are like, oh, you got a Bickenbach. You know, and he's long gone. But he's a layout man, and he was an amazing artist. So I feel very fortunate that he actually did that for me. And, you know, who knew back then in 1980 I should have recorded that, you know. But anyways, I continued on working through the industry throughout my 20s and 30s. And as I'm getting closer to 40s, I'm getting more nostalgic towards everything, because my mother had passed away in 2001. But she always said, you need to do something with the toys. You need to get something going on with the toys. And we would talk about a place that we used to go all the time called Bedrock City. It's in Arizona. It's 30 miles to the Grand Canyon. And it's basically a rest stop, but there's a giant 50-foot Fred Flintstone outside. So travelers always stop there, and my mother loved the place. We used to go there throughout the 80s, and she would buy up every piece of merchandise in that store. Even tried to buy the curtains off the wall. But, and I still have everything that she's bought. And now as a collector, all that stuff is worth a lot of money, because it's just rare. But anyways, it wasn't until like the early 2000s I was working at Warner Brothers at the studio on Osmosis Jones, and I had just finished Iron Giant. We were working there, but we were sharing the same building with Hanna-Barbera. And Joe Barbera at that point was in his 90s, and he was winding down. But me, as just a lifelong fan, I would go up and talk with him, and I would have lunch with him and his tall redhead secretary, Maggie Roberts. And they would both invite me into the office, and I would spend a couple hours just shooting the breeze with Joe and talking to him and really enjoying his stories. And I didn't really own any camera at that point, so I should have taken more pictures, but I wasn't on my radar to just really do that. But Maggie took a couple of pictures of us together, and I have one of them on the reel today. But he also said, see a Fred Flintstone right there on the couch, take it home. It was one of a doll that he had in his office for many years. So it is upstairs currently in the gallery. So it was until that time I had all the toys still at my stepfather's house, where my mother lived after she had passed. And it wasn't until 2008 I ran into Maggie Roberts again. She gave me a giant box of Hanna-Barbera memorabilia, and something sparked in me. And I started going to my stepdad's house, pulling the tubs out and doing inventory on what I have. And then I got more into it. And after being kicked around to the studio, I was jaded. And I felt like this is my little solace of my toys. And I started joining some Hanna-Barbera groups on the internet and met quite a few friends that also collect the same stuff. So I'm like, wow, I'm not as weird as these guys of doing this, you know. But it's a lot of guys that are even in their 40s and 50s that are doing it. And so I was like, I felt right there with them. It wasn't as weird. And growing up with a big sister, she was always like, what do you still have all that crap for? Get rid of it. So I'm like, okay, we're in the same house, but she didn't get what I got. So I just started managing the toys and really separating what I had. And then I got back into going to swap meets and garage sales, thrift stores, antique malls, wherever I can go. Anything I could find, I would just buy it, Hanna-Barbera-wise. And I had already had a mass of stuff as it is. So I just was adding. Also, I was learning the names of companies and the years that these toys were made. So as it was growing bigger and bigger, people were like, why don't you do a book? You need to do a toy book. And I have some toy books that people have done, and I'm always like, why did they shoot 3 figures of one set and then 2 more of the same set on 4 pages later? Put everything together. So, because as you know, they made many figures of the same character, but many companies made the same toys. So throughout the year, there's different Freds and Barneys and Scoobies and Yogis that all look different, and they're all different sets. And fortunately, I have that part in the brain that could tell you what company and what year that was made, because I've just educated myself on everything. So my biggest influence, you know, would be the Flintstones as far as collecting. But, you know, and these dolls in particular, my mother bought Fred and Barney and Baby Puss and Dino at a toy show in the early 80s. And she hated all of them because they were ugly, but she kept Baby Puss in her office because she liked that one that was cute. Years later, when I was in high school, she found Betty at a Christian bookstore, and she asked the lady that worked there if she could buy it for $10, and the lady was hesitant, but she sweet-talked her into it. And years later, I got the other one, but it's terrible condition. But I'll find her. But that's like the first set of dolls that the studio had licensed to make by toy companies. Knickerbocker at the time had no reference to the colors, so that's why Barney's hair is green and why Dino is orange. And a lot of questions are asked to me, why is he orange? Why does Barney have green hair? So, but the weirder the color, the cooler the toy is. And so they're just, you know, they're a nice little set to have. And Canada made a different set, the same, very similar, but Betty and Wilma actually look like Betty and Wilma in that set. And I have them upstairs too. So here I am, maybe almost 1. And there's a Fred right on the floor. So you could see it started early. And just always had them in my life, you know, it's just always there. So as I got older, here I am playing with a Barney. I know there must be other pictures somewhere, but I've dug in family photos, and that's basically all I can find. But, you know, my mother saved all those. And now this is like, probably I'm about 15 or 16 or at Bedrock City in Arizona. It's a really terrible picture. But it's just showing that we were on a road trip, and that was the destination place that... And being the normal 15-year-old, I did not want to take this picture at all, as you can see. But my mother made me do it, and now, 30 years later, I'm glad I have it. And, you know, it's kind of our trip. That cardboard cutout is still at Bedrock City today. It's just weather-worn to the fullest. So. That was probably ninth grade. One of our cabinets at the house. So I just liked all of it in my room. So I just started out little stuff. And I still have all this stuff today, but I just have better stuff now. Here I am with my mullet at 15. But you can see I was starting to really get into the toy aspect of displaying. And, until I was about 17 or 18, I was like, yeah, I don't care anymore. I liked it. I liked having it, but I was on the other things as 18-year-olds do. So it's just kind of, see, there's that Knickerbocker Fred up there. That's my mother, she was responsible for all of that. So that's later years. This is the Bickenbach drawing that he did for me as I was 10 years old. I've always been asked, why didn't he personalize it to you, like to David? But I don't know, at the time he just did it really fast, and I couldn't tell you why. At the time, I'm not really an autograph type person, like here, sign this, sign that. I just thought it was cool that it was a man that worked at Hanna-Barbera at the time, and I didn't know what a legend he was at the time. But I'm very thankful I have a Bickenbach that he actually drew for me as a 10-year-old instead of years later buying it at 45 at a place wherever, So it's very personal to me. And I'm honored that the museum is using it for the catalog. And you've probably seen the big Fred in the lobby. So here's a picture of my mother, which you will see in the display case with the Flintstones. So it's my little tribute to her that she's in there. So I snuck that in there. This is probably about 2002, 2003, the days when I would go have lunch with Joe Barbera. And I just didn't think about taking more pictures at the time in office. I was just more like, I want to hear about what you think of what I'm doing and everything. But he was such a sweet man. And at that time, he was, probably 92, 93. I think he passed at 95. But I was just very fortunate to be there, be with him. Because he would just come to the studio maybe 3 days a week just to sign stuff and then go home. So and this is Maggie Roberts. She was Joe Barbera's secretary. She's the lady that gave me the giant box of memorabilia in 2008, which sparked me to pull out all my toys. And I just recently got invited to her 90th birthday party this December 3rd. So looking forward to seeing Maggie again. This was almost a billboard that Bedrock City was going to use, but they don't want to spend the money to make it. Because we were looking for ways to draw more people there. And nobody knows from the outside, there's a whole town in the back, like all the little houses and all that stuff. So I just kind of put something together really fast for them. But about 7 years ago, me and my buddy were talking about Bedrock City, and he's like, well, it's only an 8-hour drive. Why don't we just go there? So we've been every year now going to Bedrock City and staying there and going on to the Grand Canyon for our annual trip. But also I've gotten very close with the Speckles family. They're the owners of Bedrock City who built it. And so this is just part of the grounds. That's an earlier picture. But they want to sell Bedrock City. Linda's in her 70s. She wants to retire, and her kids don't want to take it over. But I know what's going to happen. Developers are going to come and just build a hotel right there. And I want to keep it preserved the way it should be and bring the toys there and also make it a museum of Hanna-Barbera toys, because it's 30 miles on the way to Grand Canyon. People have to stop, and they do stop all the time. But it's in a rural area. These are old pictures from the early 70s at Bedrock City. They used to hire these guys to dress up in these hideous costumes. pretty scary by today's standards, but there's something charming about it too. Anyways, it's dorky me roaming the grounds. So, and I've also made their postcards for them for Bedrock City. This is one of the daughters of the Speckles family. In the early days of Bedrock City, they had giant statues of the characters throughout the park. So it's just who knows whatever happened to that Bam Bam. It's long gone now. And these are the walls. So it's just me and my buddy that go. And then this is present day. As I'm packing stuff up for this show, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take some group shots of single characters. And I only did about 5 or 6 characters. So I threw all the yogis together one day and just kept them up and tried to shoot as much as I could. That's Gloria. She makes sure I have all the toys in place. There's a couple dinos I have. So, and here's some Scoobies. Now with Scooby, I don't really like a lot of the newer Scooby stuff. I really try to focus on the old 70s Scooby toys because they're more appealing and they're rare, and that's pretty much what's upstairs. But, you know, all the Warner Brothers store stuff, I have it's because either somebody's given it to me or I was at the studio at the time. But here's all just Pebbles and Bam Bam. And I get a lot of people who go, oh, I hate Pebbles and Bam Bam. They're like the worst of the show. And I'm like, but they're part of the history of the show. And it's, as a Flintstone collector, you can't just exempt every character except if it's Gazoo. But that's about it. I don't have any Gazoos, sorry. But they also didn't make any Gazoo stuff. So here's some Magilla stuff. Yes, and which was a fun show. Dear friend Tony Benedict over here worked on this series. Wonderful man, amazing writer. Here's just Fred. But I kind of have a small collection compared to a couple of my friends. My friend Evan in South Dakota, he has the biggest Flintstone collection in the world. And he also has a lot more money to spend on stuff. So he'll buy certain figures for $300-$400. And we're just like, you crazy. And then I've found the same figure for like $6 at a swap meet. So it's only about timing, you know, when you'll find it eventually. But the older stuff is the better stuff, I think. So now I'm working on a book where I've shot everything individually, and in Photoshop I've cut everything out, and I'm labeling the company and the year that it's made. I've seen price books, and you can't really put a price on how much this is worth. It's worth as much as who's willing to pay for it. So I don't want to cloud the page with all that extra nonsense. And I don't have to tell you, this is Fred, this is Barney. Anybody who's going to buy this book will know who the characters are. But I tell you, I have a book that has a picture of Fred and Bam Bam, and they go, Fred's on the left and Bam Bam's on the right. And I'm like, really? They had to type that in there? So I don't want to be that guy that does that because, you know, there's something wrong if you don't know what it is. But I'm just trying to mix the pages with all Hanna-Barbera as much as I go, just to let people know what's out there and to kind of use it like a Bible. Like if they're just starting out to collect, or I have so many people at swap meets go, oh, you're that Flintstone guy, I have something for you. And they start describing an item and it sounds more and more like that movie, 94. The live action thing, and I have nothing of that in my collection. Don't want it. And this woman was so adamant about selling me these glasses, and she said they're beautiful, and I have to just unwrap them. I said I don't want them. I know what they are. They're from that movie, and they're from McDonald's, and please just burn them. And she's like, no, they're very rare. And I said, I'm telling you right now, I have over 4,000 things. I know exactly what you're talking about. Sure enough, she had those glasses. And I said, just rid the earth of it. No self-respecting Flintstone collector will buy those glasses. And anyways, but so I'm just trying to get whatever I can. These three figures are my most recent. The Fred Wilma, they're from Germany, 1966, and I'm kicking myself for not bringing them to the show because I could have fit them in there. But they're a very rare set to get, and there's still Pebbles and Bam Bam and Barney to get. So there's many characters just to find. Like the Hoppy Puppet is from Germany, and the only reason I got that was it was on eBay and they called it a green donkey. And if they would have put a Flintstone or Hoppy, I wouldn't have gotten it for $6. So that was a good find. So I don't have all the pages I'm working on, but I just tried to throw in a little taste of what I've been working on. There's my mouse. She was asking me, do I have any mice? And yes, Tom and Jerry is Hanna-Barbera property as well. I don't have very much Tom and Jerry toys. The good stuff is way expensive. But mostly Flintstones. And you'll see the 7-piece set upstairs. Those are from Spain, 1979. And it took a lot of bargaining to acquire the whole set. To get Wally and Yogi and Boo Boo, I traded 400 Smurfs to get just those three because he wanted several $100s for them. And then I bought Magilla, Fred, and Barney from a lady in the Netherlands. And I traded another Flintstone collector to get Dino. And so that completed that really rare set. And that is actually upstairs to see. So just kind of, this Scooby right here, I'm really bummed out because he was here and he wouldn't fit in the case. We popped the glass down and his ears were hitting the top of the glass and he was just a couple inches too tall. So I'm really bummed I couldn't use him, but Fred and Barney are up there. But it's just a weird set that they produced just the three of them as a set. 2 different shows. Anyways, there's just more stuff. Like, you'll see these little erasers up there. They were on my birthday cakes when I was little. And a lot of golden books. Jesse was very adamant about me bringing the Flintstone one with Fred Jr. on the cover. He's the son that nobody knew he ever had. It's like Richie Cunningham's older brother left. So I think at that point when the series got popular, they were like, they need to have a child. But this book came out before the show did. And it hit the stores, and that's why Fred Jr.'s on it. But he just disappeared before the show aired. And now we have Pebbles, and the rest is history. And you'll see them upstairs. Those dolls were, at the time when Lucy and Ricky had their baby, they got a call to have a baby on the Flintstones. So nobody knew the sex of her at the point, but except for the toy company. They knew it was a girl, and they mass-produced her, and were ready to go the day after the show aired. Needless to say, a few months later, they produced Bam Bam when they needed a matching set. So, but these dolls are actually fairly common. I see them a lot, and they made mid-sized ones and smaller ones. But surprisingly, the bone and his club are worth more than the actual doll. And because they've always gotten lost or misplaced. And when I shipped everything here, his club got demolished but it was but it already had a small hairline crack. So I had a replacement cub that I brought with me. So, and I wish I would have put her on that Dino. I brought that Dino here, but there was just no room. So anyways, that's just some of the stuff. This is all theme park stuff, just to show you. Kings 4, they had all these theme parks on the top. They carried all these toys in the late 70s, early 80s at those theme parks, and they were only licensed to use those specific Hanna-Barbera characters, not anybody else. Well, they had the Hair Bears there and stuff too, but mostly Scooby and those characters. But they're very unique in their own way, so I'm glad I have what I do, because now they're very hard to find. And the Knickerbocker dolls, we're back to Knickerbocker with the weird colors. I didn't put hardly any of the Yogi group upstairs because we didn't have the room. Except for Augie Doggy and Snuffles are up there. But you can see they made several characters, and I'm missing a few, but the Fred and Barney are upstairs. You'll see them. Just ugly. And I have a lot of push puppets, but they also made the giant push puppets of Fred and Wilma, which are very rare and sought after. So you'll see them up in the case. But I don't know why I just didn't bring the other ones on this trip. There's just so much stuff. These are old dog toys, and they never survived through the years. So I have a friend that actually fills them with foam in the inside and protects them from inside. But most of them are crushed in, and they didn't survive. And recently he just did that to a Fred, and I just got a Bam Bam, and I'm sending him to get fixed. But if you see the Hair Bear, why he's black, it's because of the coloring over the years. It's just gotten to, and the Hair Bear is very sentimental to me because Jerry Eisenberg gave it to me from his collection, from his house. So he said, you need to have this. So he's now upstairs also, along with everything else. But so this is Marineland in California. They were like, before SeaWorld, they had a lot of Hanna-Barbera and throughout the 70s and early 80s. And they a lot of Jabberjaw there, because basically the only shark. But for some reason, theme park items are very hard and sought after to find. So I try to pick anything up I can find. These are all Mark's toys, and the Rosie and Astro were given to me by a family member after their mother had passed away. And she said, we were going to the attic and we found Rosie and the dog. And I was like, you know, I knew exactly what it was at the time, because it's called a ramp walker. They actually walk when you put them on a slant. And so just to have Rosie and Astro together was such a rare piece. And not too long after, I found the Astro by itself. But anything Astro is very hard to find as a collector, because everybody universally loves them. Thanks to our friend Tony Benedict over here, very responsible for Astro. So these are all early Marx stuff. And the Tom and Jerry water guns I've actually had since I was about 5 or 6. And I do have both boxes that go to it. And I was never into them, so they're in pristine condition. So my mom just packed them away, and I have them today because I just was like, these are whatever. But I love Tom and Jerry. I just, for some reason, but I'm glad I have them today, because they're just, to find one of them is a hard find. But now I have both, so. Anyways. So this is just more of the toys, some of the, so I'm just trying to lay out in the book what's out there for people. Like if they're starting to collect, or they already have stuff, but they don't quite know where it came from, like what studio, what year, what company. People always find tons of stuff that was sold at Denny's, and they always bring it to me like And I'm like, I don't want any of that stuff. It's late 80s, early 90s. And but it's out there in droves. And I see it all the time. But, you know, I'm looking for the old stuff. And that's why I wanted to bring the oldest pieces to the show. Because, you know, people can enjoy. And more Mark's wind-ups. The Big Dino actually still works. Put battery in it. It back and forth and whistles as it goes. But Jesse loves my drummer, Fred. Those are all upstairs. Except for Barney. I don't have the Barney. Do you remember cereal when they actually had cool toys in the box? Those are all mostly 70s and 80s. Fruity Pebbles premiums. A lot of it didn't survive, but I have a good amount of it. So I'm just trying to catalog it in the book so people can use it as a reference, what was made. And I wish I had the original cereal boxes. And more of the Sokies. I had a hairline crack in the Magilla, and I just sent it to my friend in Missouri to fill with foam, and he got demolished in the mail. So he was wrapped really well, but I'll find another one. He's out there. I'm not hurting for Hanna-Barbera, but, you know, it's just sad when something like that gets killed. They made various party favors throughout the years, so I'm trying to separate them from what year they came out, because during the late 60s, early 70s, they were pretty close, and almost every other year putting a new party favor thing. So I got everything in the book, from toys to paper goods to books, records, anything you can think of, they made it. One of my favorite, Fred Roly-Polies, 1961. But one of the things I really want is that Elroy. He's my buddy's. I took a picture of his. It's a pull toy, and anything old Jetsons is very rare, collectible, because they just didn't make a lot of Jetson toys back at that time. And it's just a beautiful figure, and who doesn't love Elroy? This is June Foray. She's the voice of many cartoon characters. She's the nurses in the Birth of Pebbles episode. She's also Grandma Dynamite that Fred hires to help Wilma around the house, and she's a bank robber and throws dynamite at everything. But June was also the voice of Betty in the pilot, and but she also did many Hanna-Barbera interstitial characters throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and early 90s. And she happens to be a very close friend of mine. So close that I've taken over her back pool house, and that's where I've taken care of her and also her family. They're like my family now. And I've been with June probably a little over 10 years now, but she just turned 99 in September. So, and she was born and raised in Massachusetts, so she wishes she could have came, but there's no way. Anyways, we would do a lot of shows together, autograph shows, and a lot of people would come up with Hanna-Barbera stuff for her to sign. So, and she doesn't remember a lot of what she did, you know, like Grandma Hat Rock in the episode with the Flintstones, and you know, but she just had a big career. So she's always excited when I get a new Flintstone. So I try to I should have added more pictures of stuff when I get it and show you, but she just loves all the toys, and she's really into it as well. But anyways, that's my story, and I just happy to be here to share the toys with everybody, and I would love to hear your feedback, what you think, or if you have any questions, or just let me know. So.